Hello, everyone. Hi. My name's Cate Blanchett, and I'm here tonight to try and get a job in the sequel to this wonderful movie, which was The Lord of the Rings. Obviously, was made a very long time ago, as the producers of this wonderful animated feature keep reminding me. But it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage for a Q&A the producer, Jason DeMarco, producer Joseph Chou, my dear friend Philippa Boyens, and the director Kenji Kamiyama, who's going to be translated by Chakinozu. And the glorious voice of Héra, Gaia Wise. So, oh wow, Dorothy, you want to go home. So I'm going to stick to script. This is not my day job, so I'll do the best I can. So many questions. I've got to start with you, Philippa. Okay. I mean, as if it wasn't enough. Yeah. To have the 3 Lord of the Rings and then the 3 Hobbit. This is just the lore that keeps on giving. And I remember back in the day, there were so many questions about the lore that I would just I wouldn't even turn to the book. I just turned to you, and you'd say on page 237, there's a footnote, you knowing this world inside out. How did you approach this particular story, and why now, I guess?
Warner's had approached us with the idea of doing an animated film, which kind of sounds simple on paper, but then you suddenly think, what kind of animation are we talking about? And then you think, oh my God, what story within the vast imagination of Professor Tolkien are we talking about? We knew that we wanted it to be a standalone film, and that we wanted fresh characters to come into the world. No offence, we'll always have an elven queen. But we also decided that we didn't particularly need another story about a ring of power and a Dark Lord. So we were looking for that story. And then Warner's, I think it was Sam Register, came to us and said, what about anime? As soon as they said that, this story jumped into my head. I think anime asks more of its audience than we might normally ask. And by that I mean...
In what sense? Yeah.
In the sense that I think anime presents a story driven by the visuals, driven by the character, driven by the movement of the story, the propulsion of the story. And so it does not stop to, Jason, help me out here, doesn't stop to explain everything for you. It does not sugarcoat things along the way. And there was something about that and the warrior culture of the Rohirrim and actually going in there and attacking the story in that way that felt like maybe this would be right.
And also, right. I mean, there are amazing female characters in the anime genre, you know.
Yes,
that certainly,
correct.
You know,
actually, yes. Yes, I missed that bit, by the way.
And that's,
yes.
I mean, and that's for me, and we'll turn over to you guys later, and obviously to you, Gaia, as well, that there is an amazing central female character who I mean, I know I have early onset dementia, but I cannot remember her name being in any footnote. So, you know, and maybe we'll turn to that in a minute, but you're talking about directorial vision. It's such an interesting hybrid, and it has such a visceral texture. And so maybe, Kenji, to ask you, you have such a particular, you know, and signature style, and this is your first sort of internationally released feature, but obviously people will know your homegrown work. What drew you to sort of turn your particular take on animation to this story?
そうですね。まずそのフィリッパとジェイソンがね、今回一本の映画にするっていうことで、ヘルムハマハンドでファンの間では彼のエピソード、人間としてはこう最強の王だった彼のエピソードを映像で見たいという思いがすごくあったと思うんですね。なのでそこをこうまず映画にしようというアイディアだったんですけれども、ただその原作の短いエピソードの中で ヘルム王のお話っていうのは悲劇なんですね。なのでそれだけだと一つの映画としてこうエンターテインメントとして作るのにキャラクターが十分ではないんじゃないかということでフィリッパがねヘラっていう原作には名前がないんですけれどヘルムの娘に敵になるダンレンディングっていう部族の長が娘と私の息子を結婚させようっていうところから始まっているので、実は物語のスタートでそのヘラっていうキャラクター名前はなかったんだけど物語のきっかけとなっているキャラクターなので彼女をフィーチャーして、もう一人の主人公。
The process of casting Gaia, because when we were talking about it earlier, you were talking about Gaia's audition that really started to illuminate the possibilities that were alive in the character.
Where we started was exactly with what Kenji was saying, which is the notion that, okay, this was a girl raised by a warrior king. She had two brothers. She had a level of freedom because of that. And then what happens at the very beginning of the story is, oh, wait, no, but wait, you are still a princess, and by the way, you are valuable to us. So that means who you marry has meaning, not for you, but for us. And so Helm's notion of where his line resided was always within his sons, which immediately, as a storyteller, you go, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. And then what would this young girl feel about that? Because she has absolutely no agency in the beginning of the story, which as a screenwriter is excellent. It's perfect because it gives you somewhere to go and somewhere for this young character to grow. So you mentioned Gaia's audition, which was really interesting because, to be honest, we were struggling for a while with the character. To deliver a female character for young women. There was a lot of supposition that a female character needed to inherit the expectations, perhaps, of a girl boss or a Wonder Woman. To be honest, with the audition, we got a few of those kind of responses to this, the reading of the particular scene that we wrote. This idea that somehow she needed to be a girl boss. And actually what was interesting that Gaia brought to her audition that started to shift the character was she had this life and energy in her voice, but she also had this vulnerability. And there was a moment where she kind of like owned the fear that the character was feeling. And as soon as you started to hear that, you started to go, oh, yeah, that's where this character resides. Kamiyama actually relished the idea of doing this with the character, which gave us a lot of freedom. This is as much to say that the whole process of finding a female character who could anchor a film, lead a film, was literally organic to the story that we needed to tell.
And you were talking about in the foyer, Gaia talking about that her vulnerability as being her strength. I mean, it's a very particular ask, trying to give life and working through the animation process to bring that into being through the voice. So what was the process like for you, and what was it that you connected in the character? Was it that twinned vulnerability and strength, and not having to think about a female character as being so binary like that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to start off with, it was a daunting privilege to be asked to do it because I'm a huge fan of the original trilogy. But all of the women that we see in the trilogy are sort of fully formed, and they have their path and they know their duty. I think what I loved and really connected to with Héra was the fact that she does exactly what Éowyn does, which is not listen to the men in her life and just completely and listens to her gut. I think her vulnerability being her strength really connected with me because I think it allowed her to stay true to what's the morals and values of her soul. She doesn't allow the fear and the tragedy surrounding her to control her. And I think as women, we're told that our vulnerability is a weakness somehow. And I think in this film it's so beautiful because you see it really as a source of her strength, because it also allows her to connect with the people around her. Obviously, Olwen being the major one. And I think her vulnerability softens Helm and allows Helm to see that there are different paths that you can go down. And I just had the most incredible time doing it. When we got to the last, hour of recording, I started sort of purposefully messing things up because I went, I don't want this to end. And then obviously burst into tears. But I just had the most incredible time, and to be given this character as an actor was amazing. Doing it in voice was something I'd never done before. So finding that sort of in your diaphragm and really deep in your soul, I cherish, because it means like she's going to live with me forever now. And having Kenji there, we started now just being able to know what one another's thinking. He'll make a hand gesture and I'll go, yep, all right. Or he'll make a noise and I'll go, got it? Yes. So that's how we sort of finish the film, communicating. A lot of that and a lot of, or we'd make a noise and I'd then have to sort of mimic the noise. So it was an utter privilege. Yeah, it was amazing.
And you talk about not wanting it to end. And Kenji, you were saying it took 3 years, which sounds like a long time, but for the layered nature of the process, some hand-drawn, there was some motion capture, there was a lot of processes involved. So perhaps with Joseph, I know you've worked with Kenji before, and Jason with your roles at Adult Swim. I mean, what was the process like, the actual process from, hey, this is a good idea, to what you see on screen? Gosh. Because it's multi-layered. I think there's a really visceral quality to the animation, and that's not an easy thing to realise.
When I set it up at how we started doing it, then you can sort of take how you did it. Basically, the weird thing about this movie is because it's truly an East-West hybrid, there's no movie like this, right? And we knew that going in. We knew that we wanted to be true to Lord of the Rings, and we would have people on board who have made the original films, but we also wanted it to be a true anime, not a work for hire. We wanted Kamiyama's point of view as a director to be primary, right? So we knew that it would be combining two very different storytelling traditions, as Philippa said. And we knew that that would be a huge challenge. It was nowhere near... It was way bigger of a challenge than I even thought it would be. But we knew that going in, we were making this sort of unicorn that was going to be true to two different things at the same time. And I will just say, from the point of view of where I stood, which was as the Western producer who knows a lot about Lord of the Rings and a lot about anime, my whole job was explaining how anime works to the Lord of the Rings folks and how Lord of the Rings works to the anime folks, and sort of being that bridge. Joseph's job was actually making the film, which I view as much more difficult. So I'll let him cry and whine about that.
And that is my job.
I set it up for you.
So about the production, it was literal hell.
So enjoy. What can you elaborate on that, or are you still too traumatized?
So what do you mean?
Actually, every single these Q&As or interviews or presentation we do, I keep complaining about how difficult it was to produce this film. But then I look at her and I'm like, oh, but then okay, so I did realize at the end of the day, it's like it was par for the course. But I mean, the difficult part of it was it was not only a cross-border production. I mean, it was like literally 3 countries working together, right? So we're looking at America, we're looking at New Zealand, we're looking at Japan,
and France apparently to animate the horses.
Oh my
horses are very
In England,
Spain
and Brazil.
England chimed in.
If you look at China. I think we had about 12 countries or so getting involved, like 60 plus companies who were basically worked on the film. And then there was all different languages. So, and then we were given initially 2.5 years without a script. And I think we were finishing up we finished up the script when we were the first recording. We were recording the first time with basically nothing, but with just rough outline of what he thinks, is going to be. In the meantime, we're worrying about like, okay, how are we going to do this film? And then we're recording at the same time. So then that was kind of what was happening. But the difficult part of it was Because we needed to be faithful, because we are living in that Peter Jackson universe of the Lord of the Rings. And Weta and the folks were just so generous to basically share with us everything that was from the film. But then we had to be faithful. But what happened was, you would think of Rohan's, armors, or any of the background, any of the interiors, or any of the exteriors, horses. Those all had to be drawn because, the order of the day was it had to be hand drawn. It wasn't a CG animation order. It had to be hand drawn. And we're looking at Japan right now, anime, there's so much demand that people are booked out 5 years, from here. And literally he's like, yeah, we got 2.5 years. Do you want to do Lord of the Rings? And I'm like, is that a question? I mean, of course you want to do it, but how do you do this? And I think that's when he came up with the idea of, let's make a film first in motion capture, and then let's do a CG animation, and let's do blocking, and then let's have everybody do drawing on top of it. But the thing is, the word wasn't tracing, because when you trace, it's a rotoscope. So it will move like CG would move.
So you'd overlay those three
yes.
processes on one look. And I've got one, because I know you've got a lot of questions. And then, so if you want to think about what your question might be, but just very quickly, just how, Kenji, how you worked with the actors, and where I'm understanding the overlay of CGI, drawing and animation, how you worked and folded the actors into that process. There was some motion capture, but it was facial, is that right?
最初にまず全部のシーン、キャラクターの声を当ててもらったんですね。ガイアをはじめ他の役者さんたちにまず声を当ててもらう。でその時はまだ全く絵がなかったので、おそらくガイアもこれ一体私どういうシチュエーションでこのセリフを言ってるのっていうのすらわからない、そういう状況の中でまず声を全員俳優さんに当ててもらって、でその時にカメラをマイクの横に置いてですね、ちょっと恥ずかしいかもしれないけど演じてるところ顔を撮らせてねって、それをやっぱり英語の口の動きをこう撮りたかったので、まず最初はそれをやりました。でその後に、モーションキャプチャーを今度は日本のキャプチャーのアクターさんたちに全部のセリフをですね編集して、僕が書いたストーリーボードに沿って、まだラフな絵なんですけど、それに沿って皆さんのセリフをこう並べて、ある程度こう絵とセリフがある状態にしたものを、今度それをもとに日本のモーションキャプチャーのアクターさんに芝居をしてもらったんですね。なのでそのベース、この皆さんが見てもらった映画の絵の動きのまずベースになる部分っていうのを、今度はこうボディアクションの方のアクターさんに、演じてもらって、でそれを今度データにして、それで今度 3D のキャラクターにそれを入れることで、一回映画を作ってるんですね。でモーションキャプチャーは人間の動きは撮れるんですけど、馬の動きは撮れないんですね。馬は演技をちゃんとしてくれないので、あとスタジオに馬を何頭も連れてくることはできないので、今度はこの馬の動きを 3D のアニメーターたちにつけてもらって、この人間が演じたキャラクターとこうコンポジットして、これでようやく2000機の騎馬兵が動いたわけですよね。
I mean, there's so many questions that I have and so much that I want to ask, but that's a bit unfair. So if there's anyone out there, there is a mic. Person in the fourth row, I think.
Good evening, konbawa. My question's for the director. I just wanted to know, in the film, what part are you most happy with or most proud of that really stands out?
すごく難しい質問ですね。はい、
The script.
スクリプト。
The horses.
Yes.
It's the producers.
はい。 全てのシーンでね、全てのスタッフが本当に頑張ってくれていて、この素晴らしい映画ができていると思うので、なかなかどこがというふうには言えないんですけれど、でもそうですね、原作にはないこのオリジナルのね、ヘラっていうキャラクター、これはヘルムの魅力をさらに引き出すキャラクターになっていると思うんですね。彼女がある種お客さんと同じ目線っていうのかな、ヘルムの物語自体はすごく客観的に書かれていて、彼のキャラクター自体はどういう人間だったかっていうところまでは原作では掘り下げられていないんですね。で兄弟たちも映画の全般にどんどん死んでいってしまって、ヘルムの人生を最初から最後までこう見届けてくれるキャラクターがどうしても必要だったんですね。そのキャラクターをフィリッパと発明して、でガイアがそれを演じてくれて、どんどんこう彼女のキャラクターっていうのがオリジナルなんだけれどもすごく生き生きとしていてね、なくてはならないキャラクターになっていったっていうのがこの映画を通して作っている中で、我々もすごくヘラのことが好きになっていったし、彼女のキャラクターをこの映画の中でね生み出すことができたっていうのはすごく誇らしいし素晴らしい体験だったですね。
We've got time for one more. Make it a goodie.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Just a quick Hobbit question from me, I suppose. I'd like to ask about the inclusion of the character of Saruman and the use of Christopher Lee's voice in the film. But what was that process like of finding that line, and has the inclusion of Saruman been in your minds from the get-go, or when did that come into the process?
The reason for Saruman was we actually eschewed the notion of trying to bring any of the live action characters into the film beyond anyone who needed to be there. And actually, of all the characters in the live action films, if you're any Tolkien geeks out there, well, this one here knows what I'm talking about, is that Saruman does deserve to be there because he is part of that story. It is when he takes over Orthanc. The Tower of Orthanc is part of the story, and it is also when he begins that relationship with the King of Rohan. So it was this nice little kind of foreshadowing of, if you are ever in need of assistance, my lord, which plays into the king that we then meet in the live action films, brilliantly played by Bernard Hill, who this film is dedicated to, by the way. So it felt like a natural piece of storytelling in terms of, you have that idea and then you bring it to the director, and Kamiyama-san embraced it wholeheartedly. And then it was trying to figure out how to do it and whether we could let Christopher's own voice be there and do the performance, and finding that line was one of the ones that led us in there.
そうですね、そういう提案があって3部作とこの映画がつながっているんだっていうことを表現する上でサルマンが出てくるっていうのはすごいいいアイディアだなと思って、アニメーターもクリストファー・リーそっくりに描いてくださったしね、もう一目で分かる彼だっていうね。でそこに彼の本当の声が入るっていうのは僕たちこのアニメの映画を作ってるスタッフにとってもそのフィリッパのアイディアがね3部作とこの映画をすごくつないでくれるすごく重要なファクターになるっていうふうに僕たちも思って、彼が一言だけど出てくれるっていうのはもうすごく感動しましたね。
And yet also it has the quality of a standalone, reinvention, in no small part because of obviously the central character. But thank you all for coming, and please put your hands together and thank this extraordinary team.